Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. We do educational videos here on this channel, and we focus on great theories of everything, all-encompassing theories, grand unified theories, mostly obscure, things that maybe somebody worked on for their whole life but never really got any credit or recognition or financial, remuneration. But they're important theories because they give us a holistic worldview, and they can help us in a number of different ways to round out our paradigm shifting and our awakening to 5D consciousness. And today is our 60-second video that we've done on the book called Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha by Daniel Ingram. And Ingram is an American. And he's gone over to the Far East and spent months and months in monasteries over many years, and done months-long meditation retreats where he's doing 18 hours a day, and also conferring with many of the native monks there to dig into their ancient wisdom. I think it's a mistake to think of Buddhism as a religion. It's more a technology or a science of meditation. Now there is a morality component, but that morality is not necessarily needs to be tied to a religion. I think that regardless of what your religion is, you can still use Buddhist meditation, and it works. It provides reproducible experiments in reality. And Ingram focuses on two different kinds of meditation: insight meditation, or I'll say first concentration meditation, focusing on an object of your meditation, and also insight meditation, or vipassana, which is opening yourself up to your six sense doors, your five senses, and your mental impressions, and investigating them for the three characteristics of impermanence, dissatisfactoriness, otherwise known as suffering, and no self. So all of your impressions have those three characteristics, and as you grasp that, your mind speeds up. You become more powerful mentally, and are able to kind of be more clear and fast with your mind, and ultimately you can eventually become so-called enlightened and eliminate suffering for yourself and to grasp the wisdom of the universe. Now we're in, I think, chapter 38, and this is on all the different models of enlightenment, and Ingram is pretty critical of most of these models of what actually constitutes enlightenment, what are the telltale signs of enlightenment, how do you know if you're enlightened or not, and stuff like that. So right now he's talking about the direct perception model. He introduced about 20 different models, and he's going to go over that. His favorite is called the non-duality model, but now which he talked about in the last episode, and now he's going through the other ones, and he's kind of trying to show why they're not as good as the non-duality, I think. So we've got like one more paragraph to go here on this direct perception model, and we'll start here. The best result of this increased clarity is that when it is well developed and locked in as the default mode of perception, reality naturally shows its true nature without any effort required to perceive it, what the Tibetans refer to as self-liberating. There are many names for this way of perceiving things found in other traditions, but regardless of what you call it, I would highly advocate for trying to establish this way of perceiving sensations as the default, as the vivid freshness that results from this is remarkable and vastly better than other modes of reality perception. It is common for people to have glimpses of it along the way, and the memory of these experiences can help keep us not only motivated to practice, but also to point the way. And that way involves being meticulously attentive to whatever is going on and trying to perceive the bare sensations just as they are. Okay, this is called the time and space models. Time and space models, some of which I do find to be of value, have to do with alterations in our perception of those two basic aspects of reality. And if you've watched any of my 580-some videos on the reciprocal system of theory from Dewey B. Larson, you would basically say that's accurate. The universe is made out of motion, and motion is the relationship between space and time. So those are the two basic aspects of our reality, which is motion. Really change in 3 dimensions. The general themes regarding time are the reduction and then elimination of the sense that there really is a past, that there really is a future, and that these are something different from the memories and expectations that occur now. And I'll add that Larson says that, time and space do not exist in and of themselves. They only exist together in motion. It is not that practically there are no past and future, as practically there are, from cognitive, predictive, anticipatory, memory-based, and related functional perspectives, but that we can live more and more fully and naturally in this moment, a shifting moment of memories, expectations, etc., by increasing our sensate clarity through standard practices focused on what is happening right here and now. We can learn to perceive these reasonable mental functions which generally relate to time and space as immediate and as a continually unfolding present, however you wish to describe this. This increasingly automatic clarity about how the sensations related to a sense of time, related to an anticipated future and memories of a past, are always just happening now. And this perceptual understanding leads to reductions in the sense of time pressure, meaning stress related to time. Reducing and then eliminating that stress is of real value due to reducing and then eliminating this aspect of suffering. Related to this is the deconstruction of space, which involves more and more directly perceiving that space arises on the fly, and that various sensations are actually integrated with space, such that we might even reduce the number of sense doors to 1, that being the space sense door. And notice that space itself has textures and qualities that we usually divide up into the other sense doors, but really, when carefully investigated, seem to just be part of the integrated, fluxing, vanishing, reappearing quality, texture, volume thing. This way of perceiving cuts away a lot of boundaries, and when fully integrated into the way we perceive reality, causes profound alterations in perception that allow for levels of clarity to be naturally present. And these are hard to come by without that aspect of understanding. This section is called the fundamental perception models. Related to the non-duality models, and basically an extension of some aspects of the direct perception models, are the fundamental perception models, which are also useful for practice. I say models here because various traditions emphasize different qualities of phenomenal occurrence as being ultimate from a practice-oriented point of view. For instance, the Theravada uses the three characteristics of impermanence, suffering, and no self, as you know well by this point. The Mahayana tradition, Tibetan specifically, may emphasize shunyata, emptiness of intrinsic existence. And the Vajrayana traditions may emphasize the unison of bliss and voidness, or space-like meditative equipoise. They may also talk about Maha-Ali, Mahamudra, Rigpa, or express fundamental truths in some other way. I recognize these are complex terms that occur in specific practice contexts, and my treatment of these is superficial. My apologies to those well-schooled in these traditions who would have preferred more specifics here. Many learn of these models and infer that enlightenment involves continuously perceiving these aspects in all sensations at a conscious level, so that every waking instant we are flooded with the sense of impermanence or luminosity or whatever as our dominant experience. While attempting to perceive this at all times is excellent practice advice, particularly when on retreat. Were these models true, then realization would seem to involve flooding the consciousness of the individual with a ton of unfiltered and unfocused sensate information from all sense doors at all times. While there may be moments or bursts of this sort of perception in enlightened individuals, this is not what finally happens, or at least not the way most would imagine it. The reasons for this are manifold, including that intensity and focus of sensate reality varies widely, just like the rest of the specific aspects. With strong awareness of how things are, a process of identification stops, and the switch is thrown, as noted above in the non-duality models. By following the practice advice of the fundamental perception models, we may come to stop this process. A man asked the Buddha if he was continually aware of the fact that he was awake, and he said that he wasn't, unless he paid attention to the awakened aspect of his sensate world, and then it was obvious. However, as the Buddha said, do not imagine that you must continue to carry the raft once you have crossed the river. While awakened individuals can, at a whim, notice the true aspect of sensations, just as color is perceptible to a person with good eyesight, assuming they are not colorblind, so these aspects are clear to an awakened being of various degrees as they progress along the path. That said, just because a person can perceive something doesn't mean that aspect is the dominant aspect of consciousness at all times. In short, the fundamental perception models are very useful for practice, but do not quite accurately describe the experimental results. This section is called the specific perception models. as opposed to the fundamental perception models, which we just went through. Specific perception models essentially state or imply that an awakened being will be uninterruptedly hyper-aware of every single sensation that arises in their field of perception, including not just the ultimate aspects of fundamental perception models, but also every single little detail of the content of those sensations, achieving at all times the perfected fusion of the completely open and panoramic perspective of high equanimity with the laser-like precision of the arising and passing away. The equanimity is stage 11, arising and passing away is stage 4, at its peak, which is the AMP event. It implies that rather than stopping a process, enlightenment is about becoming so fantastically alert that you see not only the true nature, but also the specifics of every sensation that arises at all times, like some sort of perfect version of Sherlock Holmes. This is not even close to what happens in experience. While awakened beings will cycle through those stages, when mindfulness is low, then each of those stages will present in a low-key way. And only for moments here and there will there be anything like that kind of hyper-intense awareness. Though when enlightened beings are on retreat and or powering the mindfulness and concentration, they can temporarily achieve something that resembles these high ideals. The specific perception models are another instance where practice instructions get turned into an ideal of what is supposed to happen in the same way as happens with the fundamental perception models. They become one more example of carrying the raft after we have crossed the river. Again, mindfulness comes and goes, sleep comes and goes, though the Tibetan teachings on dream yoga are very intriguing. More on that later. Concentration comes and goes. Various perspectives and perceptual thresholds parade through, and the cycles of the jnanas continue on and on, with a few possible exceptions noted later. The ideals in this model and many models that follow are sometimes used as a weapon by those who like to criticize those who claim, rightly or wrongly, to be awakened. Examples include, "Don't you remember when I said such and such? Didn't you notice how I cleaned the bathroom? Or how could you have forgotten to pay the power bill?" And the implication in each of these is that awakened beings should have perfect awareness of all aspects of their sensate reality, as well as an infallible memory. This ideal is unfortunately completely bogus. I so wanted to be a sensation-perceiving superstar with a photographic memory, but have been sorely disappointed. There are people with photographic memories, but it is a separate axis of capability from awakening. Since basically everyone out there has some aspect of this model in their working definition of what enlightenment must be, enlightenment in quotes, these ideals can be a problem in close relationships, particularly business and romantic relationships for those who are out of the closet about awakening, but still running into the misconceptions that abound about what awakening entails for real life. In this basic vein, this brings up another selling point of realistic, down-to-earth human models of what awakening delivers. If you tell people you are enlightened and promote very high, idealized, delusional, perfectionistic models of awakening, those who know you well will quickly realize how full of shit you are, particularly people such as spouses or partners, co-workers, best friends, and the like. Further, The more you get stuck trying to be like the person you dream you are supposed to be rather than who you are, the more isolated you can get in your false and pretentious fantasy land, locked away from the grounding, healing, human, and helpful reality testing that comes from community and real, vulnerable, close human relationships. However, if the specific perception models are a problem in this way, you haven't seen anything until you get to the emotional models. And so this section is called the emotional models. The first edition of this work is known for various things, including and perhaps particularly this section. Its revision will probably cause some consternation among some readers, perhaps praise from others, and very likely other reactions I haven't anticipated. My apologies if anything here seems contradictory to what came before, but this is my best attempt on my current available data to make sense of what has been a hotly debated topic in my circles. It probably will produce more questions than answers, and those looking for something more definitive will have to look elsewhere. It will hopefully frame the complexities and controversies in some way that will at least allow you to understand some of the basics of the discussion. Since I wrote the first edition of Mastering the Core Teachings of the Buddha, I have had the privilege of meeting and conversing with many other dedicated explorers with much talent, long practice histories, using a wide range of techniques, high standards, as well as high ideals about what practice might lead to. I got to be part of their adventures in some ways, sharing techniques and tricks with them as well as learning from them, and thus they became part of my adventures and explorations. Central to all of this is what to do with the emotional models, which promise some sort of emotional transformation, some elimination of certain emotions, or the elimination of all emotions entirely. Thus, before the main party begins, I add the following practical points. Adopting a limited emotional range model may tempt us to imitate a limited emotional state. Thus, rather than investigating the sensations that make up that emotion or understanding the causes and conditions that led to that emotion arising, we are repressing that emotion. We may get farther and farther from ourselves instead of more in touch with ourselves. Real-world experiences with my own practice and those of my valiant and remarkable co-adventurers confirms this again and again. Investigating emotions themselves can be both rewarding and difficult. This is number 2. I guess there are only 2. Most people on meditation retreat who attempt this come away with mixed results. Many get overwhelmed for various periods of time by their issues, delving into circular thought patterns that often don't end up leading anywhere except to reinforcing and repeating those thought patterns through strong concentration. Some do occasionally arrive at helpful resolutions of those issues as insights into various other ways of perceiving and then interpreting that situation arise, or in the process of finding those sensations in the body and noticing their true nature, or other variants on those themes. More attention to the sensations that make up emotions and to the sense of how they arise and function eventually brings more clarity to them, and so is very worthwhile. That said, here goes the fun from the first edition, modified in places to make it more to my taste these days. Okay. The limited emotional models are so fundamental to the standard ideals of awakening as to be nearly universal in their tyranny. You can't swing a dead cat in the great spiritual marketplace without hitting them. Almost every tradition seems to have gone out of its way to promote them in the most absurd and life-denying terms possible, though there have also on occasion been attempts at reform. I must acknowledge and express thanks for the attempts, however ineffective, bizarre, mythologized, cryptic, vague, and culturally naive, which the Tibetans and Zen traditions have occasionally made in this regard, and mourn their nearly perpetual failure to make these issues clear. At least they tried, whereas the Theravadins have barely tried in 2,500 years, as far as I can tell, except for the vagueness you sometimes find in the Thai forest tradition on the subject. If I am wrong, please do let me know, and please provide specifics. These emotional models basically claim that awakening involves some sort of emotional perfection, either gradually or suddenly, and usually make these ideals the primary criteria for their models of awakening, while often ignoring or sidelining issues related to clear perception of the true nature of phenomena. Usually these fantasies involve elimination of the negative, so-called negative emotions, particularly fear, greed, hatred, anger, frustration, lust, jealousy, restlessness, and sadness. But some claim to eliminate all emotions, period. At a more fundamental level, they promise the elimination of all emotional forms of attraction and aversion. As I'm sure you can already tell, I am no fan of most of these models of awakening. In fact, I consider their creation and perpetuation to be basically evil, in the good old "you should burn in hell for perpetuating them" kind of way. However, as guidelines for trying to be kind and behave well, training in morality, I find them of real but limited inspirational value. I acknowledge the hints of truth they contain and also what a marketing ploy they are, and will attempt to make both aspects clear. This is not easy to do, and the dogma of the emotional models is so deeply ingrained in us all, that shaking it can be the work of a lifetime, even in awakened beings. In fact, cognitive biases that cause people to interpret basically anything you say against the emotional models back through some sort of emotional model in disguise filter is amazing to witness. It is like we just can't imagine awakening without them getting in there somewhere. I find even those who have bought into the general operating concept that there is something wrong with the emotional models falling back into their clutches again in their own practice. The practical application of being explicit about our specific emotional models is that it is nearly guaranteed that we will try to become like the model we consciously or unconsciously adopt. While even very early insights such as mind and body, stage 1, and can definitely help us handle our emotions with more balance and spaciousness, it is easy for us to buy into the limited emotional range models to go around imitating an emotionally limited or limiting state by repressing, denying, or ignoring what's actually arising in our experience, or our basic human nature, as I know all too well from my own practice and that of my colleague Bill Hamilton, who often warned to avoid some form of ideal-driven self-hypnosis that would cause me to unconsciously imitate spiritual ideals without real understanding. He made an excellent point. It is also worth mentioning that a relentless emphasis on not indulging in the content of experience, but noticing the 3 characteristics of the sensations that make up emotions can easily become a form of emotional repression and or dissociation, So be careful to try to avoid that. Noting is not supposed to turn us into robots. It's supposed to sharpen our wisdom and to help us realize the intrinsic alignment of heart, mind, and body. I personally benefited from going back and giving the emotions much more attention after my more technical phase in which I gained some fundamental insights. It helped to round out the picture and to take those insights and integrate them into various aspects of how the emotions can manifest. Once we gain transformative insights into it is helpful then that in that new mode of perception to revisit previous issues, hang-ups, neuroses, tensions, and conflicts, bringing them into awareness to see what is different and what is the same about them. This revisiting often leads to a changed perspective on them, and this often provides at least partial resolution of some aspect of them that was caught up in some previous way of being. Doing this consciously, intentionally, as a systematic practice often provides some additional looseness, openness, clarity, perspective, humor, and balance. By this point, we are likely to be very, very familiar with our issues list. We might even write them down, sit down after deep insights and bring them to mind in this new space one by one to see how they feel, how they perform, what is still sticky, what is less so, and so performance tests whatever it is we have learned on the cushion. I realize that by writing a paragraph like this one, I risk undoing the necessary counterbalancing of the emotional models. However, if your fundamental insights don't change something essential about the way we perceive and relate to what dwells in our human hearts, particularly the tricky bits, then more insights are called for and likely available with good insight practice. As one of my favorite meditation teachers, Sharda Rogel, once said, meditation is not about turning a human being into a stone. It is about turning a stone into a human being. I don't know if this is her original statement, but she is the one who shared it with me. Okay, I think we're going to stop there and continue with this section on the emotional models tomorrow when we return. Thanks for tuning in today, and have a